If you were to ask me what my last meal would include, I would say the same now as I would have said as a kid. Ooey gooey cheesy mashed potatoes and a buttery salty yeast roll, along with a warm homemade chocolate chip cookie for dessert. Then again, I probably wouldn't be hungry if I knew it was my last meal. Nevertheless, for me, a Southern homemade yeast roll trumps all on my list of favorite foods. Today, I'm sharing with you one of my all-time favorite yeast breads, the sour cream Pocketbook Yeast roll. This roll is a favorite among Southern American bread bakers. If you've never eaten one, you've been missing out. You know, sour cream as we know it today has only been used in cooking since the early 20th century, thanks to the traditions of cultures and countries in Eastern Europe. The sour cream pocketbook rolls are fairly new bread. Not much history here. Butter, sugar, sour cream, eggs, and yeast. Oh my! While I will always cherish my grandmother's yeast roll recipe, this yeast roll ranks very high on the list of best tasting yeast rolls. Not only that, wait for it, no kneading! Can you believe it? This bread recipe would be fabulous for your holiday gatherings. I make them throughout the year since they are quite simple and everyone I've ever made them for has gone cuckoo over them. Seriously, I hope you give these a try. Let's get to the recipe. For our sour cream pocketbook yeast roll recipe, you'll need sour cream, butter, granulated sugar, salt, yeast, eggs, and all-purpose flour. Minimal ingredients for an incredibly light, yeasty, salty bread with a hint of tang and sweetness. These are savory rolls though, not sweet. This roll is a 2-day process or one long day. But please don't be deterred by this because most of the action is passive. On the first day, which can be just before you go to bed or in the early morning of the day you want to eat them, combine and refrigerate the ingredients. We start by activating the yeast, so you need a small bowl and you're going to whisk together 4.5 teaspoons of yeast, which is 2 packages from the store, and a half a cup of warm water that's heated to between 100 and 110 degrees. And I just used tap water and heated it for 20 seconds in the microwave. It was just right. Whisk this up, set it aside for 5 to 10 minutes to allow the yeast to activate, which means it'll become bubbly and frothy. In the meantime, you want to dice 4 ounces of butter, which is the same as a stick, or 8 tablespoons. Place that in a bowl, and we dice it because it just makes it easy to melt more consistently. And then to that, we're going to add a cup of sour cream, which is 8 ounces, and I sprayed my measuring cup here with cooking spray so that hopefully my sour cream sort of oozes out. And it did. See? Cooking spray actually works pretty well. So now we're going to put this in the microwave for 30 seconds because we want that butter melted and the sour cream warm. We do not want this too hot or else it'll take longer to cool down for us to add the yeast mixture. So you want it to where the butter is just melted. At this point, we're going to add a half a cup of sugar. I know it sounds like a lot of sugar for a savory bread, but it's not. That little bit of sweetness really adds to the flavor. And then if you're using salted butter, add 1 teaspoon of salt. If you're using unsalted butter, use 1.25 teaspoons of salt. And then just mix it up. And once it's mixed, we're gonna have to set it aside for just a couple of moments. And maybe you don't have to as long as you didn't heat it up too much. As long as it's lower than 115 degrees, you can add it to the yeast and you won't kill the yeast. We're gonna add 2 beaten eggs to the sour cream mixture. And you want to crack your eggs in a separate bowl first, just so that you don't get any shells in it, but also to catch if you have a bad egg. And since they have to be lightly beaten anyway, and that's 2 eggs. Stir this up. In a very large bowl, we're going to add 4 cups of flour. I've added my 3, and just be sure to fluff your flour so you don't accidentally add way too much flour to your recipe, and then it throws all of your measurements and ratios off. Make a well in the center, just makes it a little bit easier to combine everything. We're going to add our sour cream mixture in there. And then since our yeast is nice and frothy and bubbly, it's also ready to go in the mixture. Nothing is too hot to kill the yeast, but everything is warm enough that it should keep the yeast activated. Then we get the fun job of just stirring it all together. As you're stirring this, make sure that you get all of it mixed well together. Check the bottom of the bowl, make sure you don't have any flour remaining. We're giving that time in the fridge for the gluten to just slowly start to activate. which is sort of why we don't have to knead it. This bread doesn't really require that. And it will rise in the fridge, so in the morning or later in the day when you go back to it, you'll see that it has puffed out. It is going to continue to grow, just not very much because the cold slows down the gluten. Cover your bowl with plastic wrap. You want to seal it there. In the fridge it goes. Day one, roll prep done. Now we let the fridge do its magic. The dough will slowly develop its gluten as it sits, so guess what? I'll see you tomorrow. It's day two, or the night of the morning you actually made the dough. This step is all about dividing, shaping, rising, and baking. There still is really more inactive time than active. Really nothing difficult. The rolling and the shaping isn't really much effort at all. Take a look at our dough. Mine was in the actual refrigerator for about 24 hours. But guess what? It was already risen like this well before that, and it's almost doubled in size. That's why we use such a big bowl. So you want to lightly flour a work surface, and we're going to turn this beautiful dough out onto it. You saw how much this dough rose in the refrigerator, and we even had salt in the dough. Now we just want to eyeball it, tear it in half, put half in the bowl, and we're going to work with the other half. The only reason why we're dividing it in half is just so it's easier to manage. That's it. So we're going to roll this out so you can flatten it out a bit to make it easier to roll. Add flour as you need to. We're going to roll it out to 1/4 of an inch thick. The reason why we want it so thin is because we're going to be folding these in half, and we don't want them to split open when they're baking or when they rise because they're too thick. Next, you need a 2.5 inch diameter cookie cutter or biscuit cutter, and then we're just going to start cutting out rounds like that, and that's how thin they are. Again, 1/4 inch thick. So what you're going to do for each one of these is you're going to melt 2 tablespoons of butter. You're going to brush the top of each one of these with the butter because we want more gooiness. Take a knife. You're going to add a crease in the very center of it. Fold it over. This is why we don't want them too thick. This is what makes them called pocketbook rolls. This reminds me of my grandma when I make those, because one of my grandmas, the one who was well known for her cornbread that I will make one day for a video, that's what she used to call her purses, were pocketbooks, which I don't know anyone who calls them that now, but they look like a purse. So you're going to seal by pinching just the edges, seal in that bit of butter, and also to keep these from popping open. Okay, so it's like a half moon. Take a cookie sheet lined with parchment paper. We're going to line them up so that the sides are touching each other. And you're going to do this for both sets of dough. Once you've cut out all you're going to from that one roll, just gather up the rest and we're going to add it to the other half. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing we did with the first one. Just add your butter, crease, fold, and seal. Add it to the pan, slightly touching if not close to it. So we made 43 sour cream pocketbook rolls. All we have to do is cover them and sit them in a warm area for about an hour till they're puffy and almost double in size. We are in the final 30 minutes of the rise, so go ahead and preheat your oven to 375 degrees. The rolls have risen and are puffy. Now it's time to bake them, so place them in the oven and bake for 12 to 15 minutes or until golden brown. Rolls are baked, hot right out of the oven. Now we're going to add the final flavoring touch, which is just by brushing these rolls with 2 tablespoons of melted butter. We don't even have to let them cool. We can dig right in once we've topped them with the last salty, ooey gooey flavoring. Okay, let's go ahead and cut into one of these. Oof, just flaking right off. All right, notice how thick they are. And this is why they're called pocketbook, because they look like the top of a purse. And you would just open them up if you wanted to. Man, I could smell all that rich, salty, buttery. Look at that tear. Oh yeah, nice gluten stretch, baked all the way through, so light and soft. Oh, they smell incredibly good. These are like the Sister Schubert rolls you can buy in the store. These are better than those. Now let's get Scott in for a taste. Hi, Scott.
Hey, what do we got today?
It's sour cream pocketbook yeast roll day.
That's a mouthful.
I know. Are you excited for these?
Yeah.
You know these well. In fact, you and I both love these rolls. And can you believe it? I've been making these rolls for over a decade now.
Wow.
Yes, so this is like one of our favorites that we've been eating a long time. So you can already describe these before tasting them as I could, but let's amuse them. Go ahead and give it a try. Are these as mouth-watering as they usually are?
They are, yes. Not too flaky, but they're nice and soft on the inside, very buttery. Just a good kind of accompanying roll for any meal, really.
You know, I really do hope you enjoy these because guess what? You're eating these for Christmas this year.
Hey, that sounds good.
Once they cool, they'll be wrapped up and stored in the freezer until Christmas. So for those of you at home, you can do the same. Just make them now and freeze them until you want them. And then on the day you want to eat them, just let them thaw on the counter for at least an hour. Wrap them in foil, heat them in the oven at 350 for 10 to 15 minutes, and they will be warm again, and they'll be just as fresh as though you just made them. All right?
Great.
Thanks for watching. You know my request. I appreciate you subscribing, liking, and sharing my videos. And until next time, go bake the world.